Sodom. Just the name could send chills down your spine, or perhaps a thrill up your leg, depending on your inclination. It wasn't your typical sleepy village. This was a place where the sheep counted before you went to bed, a town where indulgence was just the starter. Picture Las Vegas, after a wild night with Bacchus, with a hint of Gomorrah's flair. That was Sodom. The streets pulsed with an energy that could make a sailor blush. Music poured from every doorway, a symphony of lutes and lyres, playing tunes a bit too risque for polite company. Dancers moved with wild abandon, their steps defying both gravity and decorum. Wine flowed freely, a crimson wave washing over the cobblestones, sweeping away the night's inhibitions and friendly hand jobs. And then there was Lot, poor virtuous Lot, trapped in this den of vice like a monk at a rave. He longed for peace, for quiet, for a nice hot cup of chamomile tea and a good scroll. But the only scrolls in Sodom were of the scandalous kind, and the tea was always laced with something that blurred your vision or stiffened your cock. Oh Lot, what were you to do? Enter stage left two ripped angels, sent by the big guy himself, to deliver a message. Because God needs others to speak on his behalf. Apparently, you'd think with all the chaos, a couple of ethereal beings would stick out like a priest's cock in a kindergarten. But this was Sodom, where the bazaar was business as usual. So, the townsfolk barely batted an eyelid as the angels, disguised as rather dashing young men, strolled into town. Now, these weren't your average harp-strumming, halo-polishing angels. These were the big guns, celestial beings packing some serious, divine firepower. They could have leveled the city with the snap of their fingers, turned every wine jug into prune juice, every dance floor into a prayer circle. But no, they were on a mission of mercy, albeit a slightly misguided one. Their mission? Find Lot, the one righteous soul in this city of sin, and get him the fuck out of there before things got messy. Seems simple enough, one would have thought. Except Lot wasn't exactly known for his quick thinking, and his definition of righteous was a little flexible, especially after a few jugs of that potent Sodom wine. Now, about our dear friend Lot. He wasn't a bad guy, not really. More like a well-meaning fellow who'd wandered into the wrong neighborhood and couldn't find his way out. He saw the debauchery, the hedonism, the blatant disregard for any kind of moral code. And it made him yearn for the good old days, back when sandals were sensible, and the wildest thing you'd see on a Saturday night was a goat sacrifice. He tried to be the voice of reason, the beacon of light in the Sodomian darkness. He'd stand on his doorstep, shaking his fist at the passing revelers, shouting things like, "Have you no shame? Think of the children, and for heaven's sake, put some clothes on." But his words were lost in the cacophony, drowned out by the music and laughter. The truth was, deep down, a part of Lot envied them. Their freedom, their abandon, their ability to embrace life with such gusto, even if it was a tad excessive. He was like a caged bird, watching his feathered brethren soar through the open sky, yearning for a taste of that unfettered joy. But alas, his sense of righteousness, misplaced as it might have been, kept him firmly rooted in his own personal purgatory. So there Lot was, enjoying a quiet evening at home, or as quiet as it could be, with the Sodom nightlife in full swing, when who should show up but our two angelic friends. Now, you'd think a man who regularly preached about morality and righteousness would be thrilled to host heavenly beings. But Lot, bless his cotton socks, panicked. He knew the reputation of his fellow Sodomites. He'd seen the way they looked at strangers, the glint in their eyes that spoke of mischief, and a complete lack of boundaries. And the thought of these innocent, albeit rather muscular angels, falling prey to their advances, sent him into a moral tailspin. So what did he do? Did he invite them in, offer them dates, figs, and a nice chat about the meaning of life? Fuck no. Instead, he barricaded his door, shoved his daughters forward, and offered them up as sacrificial fuck toys to the Sodomites' insatiable appetites. "Take my daughters," he cried, "but spare these handsome young travellers." Now the angels, being celestial beings of infinite wisdom and patience, most of the time, were understandably perplexed. This was Lot, the righteous one, the guy who was supposed to be the shining example of morality in this den of sin, and his solution to a couple of weary travellers seeking shelter was to offer up his daughters for a good rogering. He could have at least handed them some lube. They'd heard of Sodom's reputation, of course, but this was ridiculous. It was like offering hungry lion a head of lettuce and expecting it to be satisfied. They tried to explain this to Lot in the nicest way possible, but the poor guy was so panicked he could barely understand a word they were saying. Finally, they just had to put their angelic foot down. With a flick of their wrists and a muttered prayer, they slammed the door shut, struck the Sodomites blind, temporary of course, wouldn't want to be cruel, and proceeded to explain the facts of life, death, and imminent divine intervention to a gobsmacked Lot. "Look," they said, "we're here to get you out before this city becomes a barbecue pit for sinners. So pack your shit, grab your family, and fuck off." Now you'd think escaping a city about to be fucked up by the Almighty would be a relatively straightforward affair. But this was Lot's life we're talking about, and nothing was ever simple. First, there was the small matter of convincing his wife and daughters that A, two handsome strangers were actually angels, B, God was about to rain down fire and brimstone on their town, and C, running away in the middle of the night was a brilliant idea. Surprisingly, the daughters were on board with the plan. They'd seen enough of Sodom's nightlife to last a lifetime, and were eager for a change of scenery. But Lot's wife, bless her skeptical soul, wasn't buying it. She liked her life in Sodom, thank you very much. She had friends, a thriving social life, and a standing appointment at the local hair salon. Finally, with much cajoling, pleading, and a few threats of eternal damnation thrown in for good measure, Lot managed to herd his family out of the city, just as the sky began to crackle with divine fury. And as they fled, a single solitary thought crossed Lot's wife's mind. "I wonder if I left the oven on." And with that, she turned for one last, longing look at her beloved Sodom. Big mistake. So, there they were. Lot and his daughters, traumatized, homeless and smelling faintly of sulfur. Not exactly the ideal family vacation, since Lot and his daughters could watch each other get changed. They found a cave because apparently that was the go-to accommodation option in post-apocalyptic times, and tried to piece together what was left of their lives. Now you'd think after escaping divine wrath and witnessing the destruction of your hometown, you'd be in the mood for some quiet reflection, maybe a bit of prayer. But not Lot's daughters. They left their Ritalin back in Sodom and were also horny as fuck. They'd lost their home, their friends, their entire social network, and their sex toys. What they needed was a stiff drink and a good fuck. And since their father was the only man left on Earth, or so they thought, well, let's just say they got creative with their solution to the post-apocalyptic baby drought. They got Lot really drunk and wrapped a couple of hair ties around his cock to sustain his erection before they went to work on him. 9 months later, 2 bouncing baby boys were born. And thus, the family tree of Lot sprouted a couple of rather questionable branches. So, there you have it, the story of Lot, a tale of divine intervention, questionable morals, and a whole lot of really bad decisions. It's a story that's been told and retold for centuries, each generation adding its own spin, its own interpretation, its own judgment. Was Lot a righteous man? A beacon of light in a city of darkness? Or was he a clueless fuckwit who stumbled blindly through life, making one bad call after another? Were his daughters victims of circumstance, driven to desperate measures by a world gone mad? Or were they cunning manipulators who used their father's weakness to their own slutty advantage? The story of Lot is a messy, complicated, and often uncomfortable reflection of our own humanity. It's a story that challenges us to confront our own prejudices, our own assumptions about right and wrong, good and evil. It's a story that reminds us that sometimes the line between righteousness and fucking your own daughters is a lot thinner than we'd like to think. In the end, perhaps the best way to approach the story of Lot is with a healthy dose of humor. Because if we can't laugh at the absurdity of it all, at the sheer humanness of these flawed, messy characters, then what hope do we have? So let's raise a glass of prune juice perhaps, just to be on the safe side, to Lot, to his daughters, and to the whole dysfunctional family of humanity. We may not always make the right choices, we may stumble and fall, but hey, at least we're trying. And sometimes that's all that matters. Besides, it's not like we're going to get struck by lightning for telling a few jokes, right?